Good morning. Thanks for being with us today. Whether you're online at home or on vacation or here in the room, thank you for choosing to be here with us today. If I haven't met you yet, probably the best way I could introduce myself as, if you were here last week, Brooke Ackerman's husband. My name is John Ackerman. I have the privilege of playing a few roles here on staff. I oversee spiritual development. I help support our men's ministry, and I oversee our freedom ministry. And every once in a great while, I get to stand here on a Sunday morning and talk with you all. And I'm really excited to do that today. If you've been here for the last few weeks, you kind of know the drill by now, but if you're just joining us today, we're in this series that we're calling Lessons from a Meal with Jesus. And we're taking a look at the Gospel of Luke to see what Jesus did at meals, what he taught, what he did, what he spoke about, how he interacted. And then we're inviting all of us to take that from here, whether it's after this service, after next service, sometime in the next few days, and go practice doing what Jesus did. Go have a meal with people. Have conversations with people and see what God does in you and through you in that space. Now, we're going to get rolling today because Pastor Brian decided to give me 24 verses to teach on, and so we got some ground to cover. So if you want to flip over to the Gospel of Luke, Matthew, Mark, Luke in the New Testament, we're going to be in chapter 14 today. And as we've done over these last few weeks, we're going to continue the theme today. We're not teaching on a particular topic. Again, we're just looking at what Jesus did at meals. Not only to see what we can learn about Jesus, not only to see what we can observe about the character and the nature and the wisdom of Jesus, but also to see what will help us become more like him. Because friends, that's always been the goal, to not just learn about Jesus, but to become more like him. So if you've gotten to Luke 14, and I know some people, whenever whoever is up here says, flip to that place in the Bible, some of you just start reading. And so some of you may have skimmed already and realized there's a lot going on here in this chapter. In fact, at this one meal, there's sort of 4 parts, 4 movements. To me, it feels a little bit like a 4-course meal. Appetizer, entree, dessert, little something to sip on afterwards. And so we're going to sort of follow the flow of this meal with Jesus and see what he does. Now, if you've been here over the last few weeks, you've probably also noticed that we've started each message with a question. Something that if you choose to go out and have a meal with people later, you could use as a bit of an icebreaker, something to get the conversation going. If you were here last week, my wife asked the question, what was your favorite chore? What was your least favorite chore? So today I want to ask you, what were your favorite childhood games? What did you love to play when you were a kid? Inside, outside, does not matter. Think back to childhood for a moment. What did you play with friends? What did you play on your own? What were the games that you really enjoyed? And I promise you this is going somewhere. One of the games that I most enjoyed when I was a kid, and this may date me a little bit, and it doesn't look like I'm old enough to be dated, but hide and seek. Man, hide and seek was just fun when I was a kid. I'm of that generation that had the analog childhood that transitioned into the virtual and digital world. And so there was a lot of outside play, and I bought my first Nintendo when I was 7 with my allowance money. So I feel like I bridged the gap well. But man, hide and seek was just cool. Inside my grandparents' house, outside in the woods, whatever. Hide and seek was just fun. And it was fun whether I was the one hiding or the one seeking. Right? If you're hiding, the goal is don't be found. The game is self-explanatory, right? It does not require a rule book. You either hide or you seek. And so could you hide behind something? Could you find the ultimate hiding spot where people wouldn't notice you? Under furniture, behind a plant, out in the open, and just stand really, really still. Which is hard when you're a kid. Or could you be the one who sees people when they're trying to hide? All right, can you be the one who notices the little foot sticking out from under the curtain or the thing that's right there in front of you in plain sight? See, one of the things I love about this meal with Jesus in Luke 14 is I feel like Jesus is showing off just a bit. how good he is at hide and seek. He's a master. Unfortunately, the hiding abilities I don't think are so much intentional as they are just our inability to see what's often right in front of us. The number of times that Jesus is missed in plain sight. But also Jesus' ability to go and seek, to see people, to see the people that others miss, to see the people that are often hiding themselves, and to go, I see you. I see you. You matter to me. So we're going to take a look at what Jesus does at this meal in Luke 14. And we're going to see what he sees and see what he does and see how that will help us become more like him. So beginning in the first verse of Luke 14, one Sabbath day, Jesus went to eat dinner in the home of a leader of the Pharisees, and the people were watching him closely. There was a man there whose arms and legs were swollen. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in religious law, is it permitted in the law to heal people on the Sabbath day or not? And when they refused to answer, Jesus touched the sick man and healed him and sent him away. And then he turned to them and said, which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your son or your cow falls into a pit, don't you rush to get him out? And again, they could not answer. One of the challenges I'm going to have today is in 24 verses, there's any number of places I would love to stop and just camp out for a while. And there ain't no time for that. So it may feel like this appetizer moves a little quickly. Like, you know, when the waiter comes and be like, are you finished? And half the plate still has food on it. And they're like, oh, you're done. Thank you. This may feel a little bit like that today. I blame Brian. One of the things that I notice in this first section of this meal with Jesus, again, Jesus doesn't hide. Jesus does not hide himself from us. But we often don't see what's right in front of us. There's this group of people at this meal, and they're not seeing him clearly. They're seeing him, like Brooke talked about last week, through the lenses of their judgments, through the lenses of their assumptions of how you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to act. And into this space, Jesus seeks. He notices someone in the midst of this room full of people. And he doesn't just notice them, he notices their need. He notices this man's need. And by the way, this man's need is actually not first and foremost to be healed. That is a need, but it's not the need. This man's need is to be seen, to not be overlooked, to not be an afterthought, to not be ignored. I don't know if you've ever wrestled with chronic pain or a chronic condition, but I know it can often feel like people stop seeing you after a while. The swelling of this man's arms and legs is that kind of condition. It's a chronic one. And the amount of this man's life that must have been spent feeling, man, people just don't get it. People don't see me. And what Jesus does in this crowded room is he points to one person and he says, I see you. And I see your need. I see your need. I see your need to be seen, to be understood. And I do. And I can do something about it. Jesus heals him. Jesus doesn't just teach a message about healing people. He doesn't just teach a message about seeing people and valuing people. He does what he teaches. If you've been with us for a little while, you know back in May we had a guest speaker up here named Pastor Charles. He's one of our ministry partners in Rwanda. And he came up here and he did a message from the very first verse of the first chapter of Acts, where Luke records, Jesus did and taught. And this is what we see Jesus do in this moment. Jesus does, even before he begins to teach. And again, our goal today is not just to learn about Jesus, but to see what we can learn that helps us become more like him. The invitation for us is to not just learn, but to do. You see, because Jesus doesn't just inform, he transforms. And I don't say that just to say something that sounds clever or catchy, but that's the reality of what Jesus does. Jesus does not just inform. He does not just teach morality and act morally. He lives and teaches and does in such a way that people's hearts and minds, their very lives, are transformed by a moment, by just a moment with him. And so, friends, that's our invitation today. The appetizer is about to be finished. I'm coming along and I'm taking the plate whether you're done or not. This is the end of course number 1. But as you go today, maybe as you go and have lunch today, we're going to have staff members again at local restaurants. We would invite you to go and spend time with each other. But as you go and spend time with each other, maybe, just maybe, ask Jesus to show you who he notices wherever you find yourself today. If you're in a crowded restaurant or a crowded home, crowded outdoor cafeteria, though why would you do that when it's this hot? Ask him to show you who he sees in that moment. And then ask him what he would have you do with what you see. This meal begins with a miraculous healing. Can you imagine going to lunch today and asking Jesus, Jesus, who do you see today? And Jesus pointing out someone and saying, I want you to go pray with them. I don't want you to stay at your table and pray for them. I want you to go engage with them. Let them know that they are seen. And I want you to pray with them. And I want you to pray with them with an expectation that I will do something through you. Friends, Jesus doesn't just teach, he does. And we are invited to do the same. Okay, the entree is here. The plates have been cleared. Let's keep moving. Pick up in verse 7. When Jesus noticed that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seats of honor near the head of the table, he gave them this advice. When you are invited to a wedding feast, don't sit in the seat of honor. What if someone who is more distinguished than you has also been invited? The host will come and say, give this person your seat, and then you'll be embarrassed and you will have to take whatever seat is left at the foot of the table. Instead, take the lowest place at the foot of the table. Then when your host sees you, he will come and say, friend, we have a better place for you. Then you will be honored in front of all of the other guests. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Not going to spend a ton of time on this one, but as I was reading this, one of the first things that jumped out at me was a question. Where is Jesus sitting at this table as he's noticing where other people are trying to sit? I can't prove it conclusively in the scriptures, but it seems implied Jesus is not sitting at the head of the table. It seems like people are not fighting to sit next to Jesus at the head of the table. It seems like the host is at the head of the table, naturally so, and people are fighting to sit next to the host. Jesus doesn't just teach, he does. Jesus isn't fighting for the place of honor. Jesus takes the lower seat. But the next thing to notice is that the lower seat is not punishment, the lower seat is not diminishment, the lower seat is not you are less than, you're not worthy. Because I hope you caught the second half of what Jesus said. He said, take the lower seat because you will be elevated. Take the lower seat because you will be elevated. I know often when we listen to what Jesus teaches, I think it's something in our human nature that focuses on the what not to do. Okay, got it. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Got it. Okay, I won't get in trouble if I don't do those things. Perfect. That we sometimes miss the things that Jesus says to do. And what Jesus is saying here quite clearly is if you try to exalt yourself, you will be humbled. And please don't miss the conjunctions. Some of you go back to Schoolhouse Rock, conjunction, junction, right? The ands, the buts, they matter. They matter deeply. Sing them in your head for the rest of the service. I don't mind. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Does that make you feel a little squirmy? It makes me feel squirmy. I feel like what I'm supposed to do is, no, Jesus, no. I'm actually content at the foot of the table. I would like to remain here, actually. Thank you for just giving me a place at the table. No, please, let somebody else take that seat. That's actually not humility. Because God desires to honor and glorify his sons and daughters. God desires to honor and glorify his sons and daughters. Let that just sit for a minute. How do you respond to that? Because friends, this is throughout the scriptures. I'm not going to ask you to flip to all of these. I'm just going to reference them. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 30, God tells the prophet Samuel, "Those who honor me, I will honor." God speaks through the author of the Psalm of 149, who is not David in this case. "The Lord takes delight in his people. He crowns the humble with victory." He crowns the humble with victory. Paul says in Romans 2:10, "There will be glory and honor and peace from God for all who do good." Glory and honor and peace. Both Peter and James in the New Testament reference an Old Testament proverb that says this: God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Jesus is in many ways referencing this same proverb here about those who exalt themselves will be humbled and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And as Brooke talked about last week, one of the things that we've come to really appreciate doing is looking at the original language because the Bible wasn't written in English. And we both love language. We both love words. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. That word humble, I feel like we've just often misunderstood in English. But when the Old Testament uses that word humble, it means this. Humble simply means being God-reliant rather than self-reliant. The definition of humble is being God-reliant rather than self-reliant, which interestingly always exalts a person because God desires to exalt and glorify his sons and daughters. Interestingly, the first half, though, God opposes the proud. The word opposes, when I looked this up, this one just, I don't know, it was kind of cool. The word that's used there for opposed is fierce, militaristic opposition. Like God rolls out the army to oppose the proud. He marches soldiers into battle against pride. That's not like God just disagrees with pride. God is actively, intentionally, militaristically opposed to pride. But what is pride? In the original language, it's overshining, trying to be more than what God directs. God is militaristically opposed to those who try to be more than he directs, but he gives grace and elevates and honors those who are God-reliant. If you're going to be God-reliant, you are going to be elevated. If you are going to attempt to be self-sufficient, God's bringing out the troops. And interestingly, pride is often not what we think it is either. We often think of pride as, I think I'm better than you. I think I'm better than you is actually rooted in, I think I'm right in my assessment of who's better. Pride isn't just, I think I'm better. Pride is, I think I'm right. And I think I'm right doesn't always translate to, I think I'm better. Sometimes pride translates to, I think I'm worse. May I submit to you Gideon? Judges chapter 6, if you're not familiar with the story, Gideon is an Israelite in the Old Testament who is hiding in a country overrun by enemies that God has not seen fit yet to annihilate, and he's hiding in a hole in the ground because it's the only place where he and his food are safe. And he's been doing this for a while. This wasn't a one-time thing. This is normal. This is his day-to-day. And to this man who's hiding in a hole in the ground from a country overrun with enemies, an angel of the Lord shows up and looks down into the hole and says, "Mighty man of valor." Gideon's response is prideful. Do you know Gideon's response? Gideon's response is, you got the wrong dude in the wrong hole. I'm paraphrasing. My family is the least in our clan. Our clan is the least in the tribe. I am nothing and no one. God just said, mighty man of valor. And Gideon says, you're wrong. Friends, that's pride. That is not humility. God is opposed to pride. God is opposed to, I think I'm right. But he elevates those who say, yes, Lord, you're right. I guess I'm a mighty man of valor. We're going to see how this goes. The lower seat's not bad when Jesus says, take the lower seat. He's not saying you're worthless. He's not inviting you into a false sense of humility. Nor is he inviting you into a wrong sense of pride of, well, I guess this is just who I am. He's inviting you into a place of God dependence because God desires to elevate and glorify his sons and daughters. Do you believe that about God? Do you believe that God sees you clearly? Here's another fun lunch question. We'll just skip right past what were your favorite chores and childhood games, and we'll just get to the meat. Where do you not feel seen by others? Where do you not feel seen by God? What parts of yourself do you feel like you have to champion because nobody else will? What parts of you do you feel like I am the least in my family, which is the least in the clan, which is the least in the tribe? I am nothing and no one. I know who I am, and that's it. Would you let God speak to you today and tell you the truth of who you are? And would you perhaps be honest with yourself and even with those around you and admit to where you are being prideful, where you think you're right? I know who I am. Okay, we're clearing the dishes again. Moving on to dessert. Hope you're still hungry. This is not one of those times where you get to say, no, I'm full, just a check, please. So we're picking up in verse 14. So Jesus has just finished telling people, verse 12. Jesus has just finished telling people, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And then he turns to the host of the meal. When you put on a luncheon or a banquet, he said, don't invite your friends, brothers, relatives, and rich neighbors, for they'll invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. I like chocolate for dessert. This is a bit tart. Yes, it is. Remember, the goal today and really every day is not just to learn more information about Jesus, but to see how we can become more like him by seeing who he is. And one of the things that Jesus is saying to the host of this meal, who's rolled out a phenomenal dinner and made places available for everyone at it, he's shown incredible hospitality. Jesus is saying to him, you didn't do a bad job, but I want you to look at this differently. I want you to look at this the way that I do. Our goal is to become more like Jesus. And so what Jesus is saying is what I do, the way I think, the way I see, is I exalt the humble. Not those who think poorly about themselves. I exalt those who are God-dependent, God-reliant. He's saying, look, there's nothing wrong with having a dinner with your family members. There's nothing wrong with having dinner with neighbors and friends. In fact, we tell you to do that often. There's nothing wrong with a business lunch because you got to network. But he's saying also make sure that your hospitality doesn't just ensure that others will be hospitable to you. The way I am and the way I want you to be is I want you to be hospitable to those that could never return the favor. I want you to give to those who could never in a million years repay you, because that's what I've done for you. This is actually kingdom economics. This is kingdom economics 101. Paul says in Acts, he's speaking to the Athenians in Acts 17, he said, he is the God who made the world and everything in it. Since he is the Lord of heaven and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples, and human hands can't serve his needs, for he has no needs. He himself gives life and breath to everything, and he satisfies every need. In other words, we can't repay him, and he's not asking us to. He doesn't need us to do anything for him, but he wants us to do things with him. He wants us to receive from him things that we could never in a million years do for ourselves or repay him for when he does them. And then rather than spend the rest of our lives trying to make up for the fact that we couldn't do it on our own, he says, go and live towards others the way that I've lived towards you. Go help those who can't help themselves, because that's what I've done for you. I've ransomed you from sin and death and darkness and captivity. You couldn't in a million years have gotten yourself out. And you're not called to make it up to me. You can't pay this back, and I'm not asking you to. You never have to feel like you owe me. But go live towards others the way that I have lived towards you. Go do for them what they could never in a million years do for themselves. And then when they say, how can I repay you? Say, go do it for another, as I have done to you. It's interesting to me that when God is creating the world in the beginning of Genesis, when he's making the light and the darkness and the land and the sea and the fish and the plants and the animals and everything, and he calls it good. The word that God uses for good in Genesis is the Hebrew word tov. And that word tov isn't just a qualitative good like it's A+ caliber, because of course it is, it's God. Tov is good that begets good, that begets good, that begets good. I'm running out of arm length, but you get the idea. That's how God says to go live. Go do good that generates good, that generates good, that generates good. Go live in such a way that that is the effect of your life. Don't spend your life trying to repay me. Spend your life investing in the world around you. This is the most entrepreneurial invitation you will ever receive in your life. Go invest in the world around you. Invest in the kingdom. Investing in the kingdom means investing in the resources that God values most. And the resources that God values most are people. And so to invest in people the way that God does means invest in people in a way where good begets good, begets good, begets good, begets good, begets good. I'm just going to stand here for the rest of the service and say that over and over and over and over and over. And so here's another uncomfortable invitation. At lunch today, ask God who you could elevate, who you could exalt that will never be able to repay you, but who will go on to elevate others, who could never repay them, who will then go on to elevate others, who could never repay them, so that good begets good, begets good, begets good. Okay, dessert's done. A little something to sip on at the end. And I apologize in advance. I almost wanted to skip these verses because this is not like one of those sweet after dinner drinks. This is like over-caffeinated coffee where you're going to be jumpy the rest of the day. So, verse 15. Hearing this, a man sitting at a table with Jesus exclaimed, "What a blessing it will be to attend a banquet in the kingdom of God." Pause. Jesus is funny. I don't know if you know this. Jesus has a phenomenal sense of humor. You ever been at a meal where somebody has so completely missed the point? You ever been in a group conversation where someone has so completely missed the point? Jesus has just dropped bomb after bomb after bomb. I have radically healed someone on a day where you think I'm not supposed to show you what it looks like to bring the kingdom. And then, oh, by the way, I've completely flipped over your paradigm of what humility and pride looks like. And I've promised you the fact that if you just let me, I will show you who you are and elevate you to places you have never imagined. And oh, by the way, don't worry about getting other people to take care of you. I will take care of you. And so go invest. Go invest in the kingdom and the resources of the kingdom, which are people. Just, he's dropping the mic again and again. This thing's busted. It's never going to work again. And into this space, this man goes, "Man, won't it be cool to be in heaven and have food?" You're like, dude, do you understand what's happening around you? And I love what Jesus does. Jesus replies with a story. Anytime somebody asks a question and Jesus replies with a story, you should just walk away now. Like you've just missed it. Actually, don't walk away. Listen to the story and maybe it'll finally sink in. Jesus says this, "A man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. And when the banquet was ready, he sent his servant to tell the guests, 'Come, the banquet is ready.' But they all began making excuses. One said, 'I've just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I've just bought 5 pairs of oxen and I want to try them out. Little test drive. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I now have a wife, so I can't come.' The servant returned and told his master what they had said, and his master was furious and said, 'Go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame.' After the servant had done this, he reported, 'There's still room for more.' And so his master said, 'Go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come, so that the house will be full. For none of those I first invited will get even the smallest taste of my banquet.'" Jesus has just spent an entire meal telling people about the kingdom of heaven. And this guy has completely missed it. And so his statement of, "Won't heaven be great?" It's not bad. Friends, heaven's going to be great. Heaven's going to be amazing. The food is going to be spectacular, in particular. But I can almost hear Jesus saying, yes, heaven will be great. And the kingdom of heaven is not just a destination. The kingdom of heaven is not just what happens at the end of your life. Jesus, after his baptism, was led into the wilderness for 40 days of fasting. He was tormented and tempted by the enemy, and he comes out of the wilderness, as Matthew chapter 4 records, saying simply this: repent. And I could spend a whole message on that one word, but the short version is that's not fall on the ground and say you're sorry. It means think differently about everything, because the kingdom of heaven is here. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is all around you. That was Jesus' message to the world. The kingdom of heaven is here. The kingdom of heaven is a way of living and seeing and thinking and feeling and being right now. It's here. It's at hand. It's all around you. And this is what Jesus is saying. He's like, look, guy. Yes, heaven's going to be great, but I'm actually here doing exactly what you described. I'm inviting you to a banquet right now. And yet so often the response that we give to Jesus' right now invitation is, I just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me. I've just bought 5 oxen and need to give them a test drive. I just got married and I'm super busy right now. Friends, there's a question I feel like we all have to wrestle with, and I don't like it because it makes me uncomfortable. But the question is simply this: do we want the kingdom of heaven today? Or do you only want it when it's convenient? And I'm not asking you that question like I got my whole life figured out and I always say yes. But friends, that's a question we have to sit with daily. Do I want the kingdom of heaven today? Or do I just want it when it's convenient? God is not just inviting you to spend eternity with him. He is. But he's also inviting you to spend today with him. He's not hiding and waiting for someday. He is seeking you right now and inviting you to seek him. He's inviting you to seek him today and the rest of your days and all of eternity, because that's how often he's seeking you. And not just for the one-time decision of salvation, but every day of your life. To not just experience heaven someday, but the kingdom of heaven now. Because it's here. It's at hand. It's all around you. He wants you to experience it. He wants you to experience him today. So I want to pray for us. And if you feel like you've never heard this invitation to accept Jesus today, to begin to live with him today, I want to pray and give you space to do that. And if you want somebody to pray with you to do that, our prayer team is over here against the wall. But you can also pray that right where you are, because this is about you being with him. But for all of us that have said yes to Jesus for eternity, I want to make space for us to see what his invitation to us looks like today. Jesus, you are Lord. You are God. You are God in the flesh, come to earth to do for us what we could never in a million years have done and what we could never repay you for. To bring us out of death and darkness, captivity, and to restore us to connection with you and our Father. Jesus, if I have never said yes to you before today, and I feel like today is that day, I just say yes. Lord, come in. Have your way with me and in me. But Lord, if I have said yes to you already, I want to give you today. I want to not just know more about you, but I want to become more like you. I want to experience the kingdom of heaven today and every day. I love you, Lord. Thank you for making this available. Thank you for making this life with you available. I love you. Amen.